I'm one like the giants of our foremen, both brave and bold. It warms my heart to serve them all, the ale with brewer's gold. Enjoy that golden flavor, true ale flavor, all that Valentine. Ale with brewer's gold, ale with brewer's gold.
I just did something. I didn't ask for your permission and you may not even know what I'm referring to. I induced an emotion. You felt something when you watched this video. It may sound small, but it's actually incredibly fascinating. After all, you reacted to just sound and images. Your brain somehow interpreted these and created something new. Feelings. This induction of emotion happens all the time. Advertisements try to make us buy things by inducing a feeling of need, and politicians try to persuade us by linking a restrictive policy to the emotion of fear. And very often it works surprisingly well. It works because emotions are a fundamental part of being human. This shows even when we are very young. Babies can recognize emotions at the age of just 7 months. Emotions influence us extremely, especially our behavior. Feeling compassion makes us want to help someone, and feeling exam anxiety often leads to worse performance. Emotions also shape our memory. If I ask you, how was your first kiss? Or how was Christmas as a child? A vivid image probably comes to your mind instantly. Strong emotions make us remember events more clearly and intensely. But sometimes people are exposed to extreme violence or terrifying events. These traumatic experiences can become so deeply imprinted that the memories later intrude into consciousness and trigger the same physical reactions as the original event. Racing heart, trembling, panic. And these memories can resurface through completely harmless cues. This is called PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. When that happens, the person often lives in a constant state of alertness and fear. In a major study, nearly 1 in 5 Vietnam War veterans had PTSD at some point after returning home. For those who endured the harshest combat conditions, the number climbed to over 1 in 3, and many were still suffering decades later. And with all the crises of the 21st century, PTSD has become a lot more common in our time too. But PTSD is definitely not the only way emotions can put pressure on a whole society. According to a survey by the American Psychiatric Association, 1 in 3 Americans feels lonely, and many deal with anxiety or depressive symptoms on a regular basis. All of this data shows one thing: emotions are absolutely worth studying. The better we understand them, the better our chances of figuring out how to reduce the bad ones and boost the good ones. This video is just a small glimpse into the huge world of emotion research, and later we are going to dive into one specific emotion. One that keeps shaping the world over and over again. First of all, what are emotions really? Exactly defining emotions is not that easy. They are often very subjective and shaped by one's own past. Social conditions also play a major role. Some cultures have terms for emotions that other cultures don't have. For example, amae is a Japanese word that describes a kind of emotional dependence. The feeling of wanting someone you trust to take care of you, protect you. Another example is Weltschmerz. It describes a deep sadness that comes from realizing the world will never live up to your ideals. It's German and literally translates to world pain. To explain emotions more clearly, researchers have proposed a system that breaks them down into 5 components. According to this model, an emotional moment is basically a bunch of processes syncing up for a short period. First, there's cognitive appraisals, basically your brain checking out what's happening and judging whether it matters. Then you get bodily symptoms like your heart rate changing. Next are action tendencies, which are the motivational pushes that prepare you to act, like wanting to run, fight, freeze, hug, or whatever. You also have expressions, meaning your face, voice, and body automatically show how you feel, even before you say anything. And finally, there are the feeling themselves, the subjective experience. All of these parts come together to create what we call an emotion. According to the researchers, these modules have developed evolutionary. In fact, the evolutionary approach is still widely used in emotional psychology. It can be traced back to Charles Darwin. Darwin published The Expression of Emotions in Man and Animals in 1872, a work that represents the first systematic scientific study on human and animal emotion. According to Darwin, emotions are a separate system that come from our evolution. Let me explain. He proposed a theory of how emotions evolved. According to Darwin, an emotion would develop if it were clearly beneficial for survival. For example, disgust. When you see a rotten apple, you immediately feel repulsion. If you were to eat the apple, you might get sick. The feeling of disgust prevents potential diseases. Emotions such as love, joy, and affection also have a positive effect on the survival of the species. A group held together by mutual emotions is significantly less vulnerable to enemies. It's also fairer in distributing the available resources. Both positive and negative emotions therefore have a positive effect on the species' chances of survival. Charles Darwin acquired most of his knowledge through observation rather than experimentation. In psychology today are mostly experimental approaches used. In the context of emotion psychology, experiments are often designed in such a way that the variable, in this case an emotion, is manipulated and then compared with a group that has not undergone this manipulation. But how do you manipulate the emotions of the test subjects? There are several ways to do this. For example, imagination. Subjects are asked to imagine situations in their lives that triggered emotions. Vivid imagination with re-imaging of the emotions at the time, possibly with writing down the events. It can be very difficult to experience emotions in another moment. The feelings are usually not as strong and do not result in the same physical responses. But emotions can also be induced chemically, by influencing neurotransmitter systems and neuropeptides with substances that trigger, maintain, or intensify emotions. This approach is more accurate because you can determine the dose of the chemicals added. Another possibility is offered by the International Affective Picture System. It's basically a huge collection of standardized photos designed specifically for research on emotion. Scientists use these images because they reliably trigger certain emotional reactions. And that helps to keep the experiments consistent. There are pictures to induce fear, disgust, or no emotion at all. The images shown are actually not part of the IAPS. IAPS images are almost never shown publicly. Researchers want these images to stay fresh and unfamiliar for anyone who participates in an experiment. If people saw them all over the internet first, the pictures would lose a lot of their emotional punch, and that would mess with the results. Studies that rely on real first-time reactions wouldn't work the same way. Of course, everyone knows that emotions are often felt physically. As mentioned at the beginning, this is also a basic component of emotions. But is this universal? Do people feel emotions in similar places, in similar ways? Are there cultural differences? It may be that physical experiences play a role in the formation of emotions. Therefore, it's important to answer this question if we want to understand emotions fully. I found a quite interesting paper from 2013 dealing with that question. In 5 experiments, participants were shown 2 silhouettes of bodies alongside emotional words, stories, movies, or facial expressions. On one silhouette, the test subject had to mark where they felt activity when the emotion arose. On the other silhouette, they had to indicate where they felt inactivity. The 2 silhouettes were then put together and the results evaluated. And the results were this. Different emotions are felt uniformly. Not completely uniformly, of course, but clear trends can be seen. Anger is felt in the upper body, happiness throughout the whole body, shame on the cheeks, and love in the chest. The study also answered the question of the uniformity of emotions. These maps were concordant across West European and East Asian samples, so basic emotions are felt bodily in similar ways. Early theories of emotion assumed that emotions cause bodily reactions. This view was challenged though. The researchers argued that bodily responses are too slow to trigger emotions. Instead, the brain decides simultaneously which emotion is experienced and which bodily reaction is activated. In other words, emotion and bodily responses occur at the same time, but independently of each other. Building on this, the Schachter and Singer theory of cognitive attribution emphasizes that physiological arousal is unspecific. A racing heart or rapid breathing could indicate many different emotions. Which emotion a person experiences depends largely on the context, as the mind labels the arousal based on social, physiological, or physical cues. In 1962, there was a famous experiment to demonstrate this. Participants were injected with adrenaline and split into 2 groups. Those who were informed about the drug's effect experienced little emotional change, while those who were not informed interpreted their arousal in emotional terms. The emotion they felt depended on the behavior of an actor in the room. If the actor acted angry, the participants felt anger. If the actor acted happy, the participants felt euphoria. This shows that identical physiological arousal can produce different emotions depending on the social context. Further research supported the idea that physiological arousal intensifies emotions without determining their type. Participants given adrenaline experienced more intense emotions than a control group. Additionally, the emotions of others influence our own interpretation of feelings, which can enhance happiness. While physiological arousal affects emotional intensity, the type of emotion depends on context and cognitive appraisal. Later studies showed that different emotions do have distinct autonomic patterns. For example, fear, sadness, and anger each display unique physiological signatures. Positive and negative emotions generally differ in their physiological responses, but patterns within each category are often similar. Because many negative emotions share overlapping physiological profiles, tools like the lie detector are unreliable. They cannot clearly distinguish between stress, fear, and lying. The whole idea behind lie detectors is that people supposedly have a strong emotional response when they lie. Maybe because they are afraid of getting caught or they feel guilty. A lie detector now tries to measure certain physiological variables corresponding to these emotions. The heart beats faster, blood pressure rises, and sweating increases. But whether someone is lying, stressed, or simply nervous, the body often responds in similar ways. A lie detector measures these signals. This is why it struggles to separate a genuine liar from someone who's just anxious. Lie detector operators often claim incredible high accuracy rates, sometimes around 95%. But independent scientific studies paint a very different picture. The real accuracy is closer to about 65%. So far, we've discussed emotions in general. Next, we'll focus on one in particular, an emotion that has been described as one of the most destructive phenomenon in human history. Hate. There's a lot of talk about hate. It is addressed in many works of art and is an important concept in our society. Hate is also a topic of scientific interest. I found a paper from 2018 that deals intensively with various aspects of this phenomenon. First, it must be said that there are very few theoretical models and no uniform definition of hate. This is typical for many emotions. Hate has, for example, been described as an emotional attitude, a motive for devaluation, and a form of generalized anger. It is thought to arise when someone feels mistreated or humiliated, or when another person's actions stand in the way of their goals. In general, if you feel an emotion, there's also often a motive to act accordingly. Revenge, for example, aims to restore a sense of balanced suffering and to deter future wrongdoing. And anger has the emotional goal of pushing the target to change their behavior. Hate is different though. Hate doesn't just aim to hurt someone. Its underlying drive is to remove or destroy the target, mentally through humiliation, socially by shutting them out, or physically through violence, often accompanied by the wish to see them suffer. But there are different kinds of hate. The first is short-term hate, also called emotional or immediate hate. People experiencing it often make a harsh appraisal, such as the other group is inherently evil. It comes with strong physical reactions like fear, helplessness, and tension. The motivations that follow are intense: revenge, harming the target, or in extreme cases, even annihilation. Although this form of hate is short-lived, it can be incredibly powerful. The second form is long-term hate. This is a lasting emotional attitude that stays stable over a long period of time. It shapes a person's social worldview. Attachment to their own group becomes stronger, while hate toward the out group becomes more rigid. The ultimate goal often becomes the elimination or total separation from the opposing group. This form persists even when no new triggering events occur. These two forms of hate reinforce each other. Repeated episodes of short-term hate make it more likely that long-term hate will develop, and people who already hold long-term hate interpret new events through the fixed belief that they are evil. As a result, they react far more strongly and are more prone to cognitive distortions. Several features of modern political communication make hate especially attractive for politicians. Its intensity, the speed at which emotions spread, and the superficial nature of much public discourse. But using hate in political rhetoric carries significant risks. Hate-driven messages can easily backfire, producing unpredictable shifts in voter support and sometimes turning against the very leaders who promote them. So, what does all of this tell us? Emotions, especially powerful ones like hate, influence us extremely, even entire societies. By understanding how emotions work and how they can be influenced or manipulated, we become better equipped to recognize when something is pulling us in a certain direction. Emotion research doesn't just explain human behavior. It helps us stay aware to question our reaction. Thank you for watching.